The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical psychology for today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, narrated by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. On this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from Special Problems in the Study of Sufi Ideas by Idries Shah. Misunderstandings of Sufi Ideas and Formulations. What is a Sufi idea? How is it expressed? Where do we look for it? Many ideas we can easily identify as being derived from the Sufis because of context or actual attribution in the text. But the special problem beyond this is that there is no record of any other body of ideas or system which has penetrated so widely and so far into so many departments of life and thought in the East and West. No mind has been trained to expect such a thing, except that of the Sufi, who does not need the material. As a consequence, we get this questioning: is Sufism a series of shamanistic cults, a philosophy, a religion, a secret society, an occult training system, the mainspring of whole ranges of literature and poetry, or a military system, a chivalric, or perhaps a commercial cult? Serious problems in locating genuine and relevant Sufi ideas and practices exist, too, for any student who has already met a watered-down, generalized or partial variety of Sufism, whether in the East or the West. There are many hundreds of people in Europe and America who perform dervish dance, whirling or turning, though it is specifically on record in easily accessible literature that this practice was especially prescribed for local reasons by Rumi for the people of Asia Minor, the region of Iconium. Rumi, 1207-73, was born in Balkh, Afghanistan, and died at Konya, in Turkey, where dervish dancing in public is now prescribed, except as a tourist spectacle. In a similar way, when those influenced by the Western work or system, which attempts to follow Gurdjieff, died 1949, and Ouspensky, died 1947, and there are thousands of them, are forthrightly told that their exercises and methods are well known and applied in certain Sufi schools, but that they are to be used in a different way and more intelligible manner corresponding to the community involved, they are, more often than not, incapable of assimilating this statement. The Sufic gains in such cases are beginning to be overwhelmed by the losses due to misunderstanding or misapplication. Another, and until recently a rapidly growing phenomenon making use of some Sufi ideas and practices, is known to thousands in the West as Subud. Its procedure is mainly based upon Naqshbandi Qadiri methods, but in its current presentation these have been turned upside down. In the Subud meeting called the Latihan, the member waits for certain experiences, believed to be the working of God within him. Some are slightly affected, some profoundly, some not at all. The interesting thing here is that the Subud attitude values the experience, and many people who are not affected or who cease to perceive it drift away. The remainder are stalwarts of the movement. But according to Sufi ideas and practice, it is precisely those who do not feel subjective states, or who have at one time been affected by them and no longer feel them, who may be real candidates for the next stage. Truth comes after states and ecstasy and takes its place, said Kalabadi, citing Junaid of Baghdad, died 910. To the Sufi, one who does not know this may appear like a man trying to exercise his muscles, who thinks the exercises are no good because he no longer feels stiffness in his limbs. The gains of Subud are offset, at least in part, by the losses. This is the real problem in the attempted study of the original Sufi ideas through such popularizations. As this inversion has invoked Sufi terminology, the student may very well not be able to shed the Subud associations when he approaches Sufism. Yet another problem, strongly characteristic of Sufism, awakens a great deal of opposition. This may be stated by saying that Sufi literature contains material which is ahead of its time. Certain Sufi books, some translated into Western languages and therefore a matter of verifiable record, contain material which seems to become comprehensible only when new psychological and even scientific technical discoveries are made and well known. A verification of claims which once seemed bizarre or impossible then becomes possible. Western Orientalists and others have noted, for instance, that the Afghan sage Jalaluddin Rumi, died 1273, Hakim Sanai of Khorasan, 14th century, El-Ghazali of Persia, died 1111, and Ibn al-Arabi of Spain, died 1240, speak of psychological states, theories of psychology, and psychotherapeutic procedures which would have been incomprehensible to readers without the infrastructure of knowledge which has lately been acquired in the West. These ideas are called Freudian and Jungian, and so on in consequence. Sufi claims that man rose from the sea and that he is in a state of evolution covering an enormous period of time appeared to be fanciful nonsense until the 19th century Darwinists seized upon this material with delight. References said to be to the forces contained in the atom, to a fourth dimension, to relativity, to space travel, telepathy, telekinesis are frequent, sometimes as facts, sometimes as due to techniques, sometimes as man's present or future capacities. Accounts of precognitive awareness and other phenomena of this kind are to be judged only in the light of comparatively recent knowledge, or still await verification by conventional scientists. Over 700 years ago, Ibn al-Arabi stated that thinking man was 40,000 years old, while scholastic Jewish, Christian, and Muslim belief was still committed to scriptural datings of the creation being only 4,000 to 6,000 years before. Some recent research, however, now dates modern man to about 35,000 years ago. Some of the greatest and most learnedly ignorant ridicule to which Sufis have been subjected, still maintained in some circles, is due to their having stressed in their classics the dangers of obsessions being implanted in people. Sufis for centuries have pointed out the undesirable nature of indoctrination and emotion being confused with spiritual gifts, to the horror of religious enthusiasts. Only in the past few decades almost have other people come to know better than the clerics. Junaid of Baghdad, died 910, answered conditioned minds thus: "None reaches the rank of truth until 1,000 honest people testify that he is a heretic." The especial secondary problem here, too, is that although the scientist will rightly await verification of this material, or try to investigate it, gullible occultists will pursue the Sufi who speaks of these things as deriving from Sufism, urgently demanding, as of right, magical knowledge, self-mastery, higher consciousness, hidden secrets, and the rest. For the Sufi, these trustful and sometimes unbalanced people can be more of a problem than the skeptics. The believers create a further problem because, balked of easy magical knowledge, they may quite quickly turn to those organizations, well-meaning and otherwise, which seem to them able to satisfy this thirst for the unknown or the unusual, or offering shortcuts. It is not to be denied that we use this phrase, but always with qualifications. Adepts have, however, devised shortcuts to an attainment of a knowledge of God. There are as many ways to God as there are souls or selves of men. Several such bodies exist in Britain and America. If you write for the literature of one of them, for example, you may receive a publication in which it is claimed that Sufis prefer a vegetarian diet and that students must be free of caste, colour, and creed before developing occult powers. Other movements, using the name Sufi, idealize their founders, giving members a sort of interreligious ceremony. More than one practices musical recitals supposed to throw the seeker into an advantageous ecstasy, in spite of the fact that Sufi teaching is widely on record that music can be harmful, and that it is what is taught, not the teacher, which is the point of Sufism. The gains in Sufi information are once more offset by losses due to faulty practice and selectively biased reading. Asiatic immigration, Arab mainly from Aden and Somaliland, India and Pakistan, into Britain has introduced another form of Sufism. This centers around groups of Muslim religious zealots who gather for communal prayer exercises which stimulate them emotionally and sometimes have a cathartic effect. Using Sufi terminology and similitudes of Sufi organization, these have branches in many industrial and seaport cities of Britain. The problem here is not only that many of the participants will not now be able to study Sufi ideas, since they believe that they already know them, but that just anyone, sociologist, anthropologist, or ordinary member of the public, cannot always know that this does not represent Sufism, any more than American revivalist snake handling represents Christianity, or the game of bingo mathematics. The gains, once more, are on a low level. The losses are not slight. Like their indoctrinated confreres throughout the Muslim world from Morocco to Java, these coteries are often in reality groups of fanatics using the Sufi form. Some are plainly hysterics. Others never have heard of any other form of Sufism. To them, such claims as that of Ibn al-Arabi, angels are the powers hidden in the faculties and organs of man, would seem utter blasphemy, and yet they revere Ibn al-Arabi. It is not impossible that these entities, through sheer enthusiasm, efficient deployment of money, and recourse to modern mass publicity methods, will become generally considered by observers to be real Sufis or representative of Sufi ideas. It is probably true to say that religion is too important a matter to leave to speculative non-expert intellectuals or clerics. The latter tend to scramble devout activity. This is an ancient error. Ghazali was once believed in the West to be a Catholic theologian of the Middle Ages. Saint Jehoshaphat has been shown to be Buddha, and Saint Charalambos of the Greeks has been revealed as none other than the dervish master Haji Bektash Wali, who founded the Bektashis. The 15th century Christian Saint Therapion is the dervish poet Turabi. Such developments can already be seen in the countries of the East, where enthusiasts, often pleasant enough characters, outshout the Sufis, maintaining that their own antics are the true Sufism. This, in turn, has posed a sore and largely unrecognized problem for many Westerners interested in the Sufi heritage. Faced with acceptance or rejection, convinced that this must be Sufism because so many people locally consider it to be so, numbers of these students have reacted either by revulsion or by total uncritical acceptance. In Britain, to say nothing of other Western countries, there are examples of the Sufi conversion syndrome, sometimes in the case of not inconsequential persons, ready to leap into print to prove that this cult, as they have seen it among ecstatic sentimentalists, is something to be adopted in the West. It can give one an almost uncanny sensation to compare this state of affairs with a hypothetical situation in an underdeveloped area where advanced ideas have penetrated, but through lack of accurate and appropriately systematized information, have been adopted by the local inhabitants in a superficial or untoward manner. One is tempted to think in terms of the cargo cults among less advanced communities, whose members built tin can replicas of aircraft, believing that they could thus magically reproduce the wonders of supply of good things from the skies. And yet, there is no real lack of basic information on Sufi ideas. There is information, but much of it is not studied and assimilated by those who could do so. There is another characteristic problem here, the problem caused by the places where the material appears. Much material on Sufism and the Sufis, some of it the product of excellent observation, inquiry, and fieldwork in Asia, Africa, and Europe, appears from time to time in the general circulation press. But because the work is not always by recognized specialists, or because it sees the light of day in media which are not regarded as authoritative in the field, it can be missed. Here are a few recent examples. In two brilliant articles in Blackwood's magazine in 1961 and 1962, O. M. Burke described the ideas and practices of Sufis in Pakistan, Tunisia, Morocco, and elsewhere. He outlined theories and exercises well known in Sufi practice, but not always literally represented in its overt literature. In 1961, a Delhi newspaper carried a good report of Sufi beliefs and deliberations in Paris. In a specialized scientific journal in 1962, there was an important contribution by an Egyptian physician in which ideas and psychotherapeutic procedures of a Central Asian dervish community with international ramifications were delineated. None of this material will ordinarily be quoted in Orientalist or even occultist literature. No citation seems yet to have been made from an important article by another worker dealing with the living, oral tradition of secret teaching in the Middle and Far East, which was published in the Contemporary Review in 1960. The desire to diffuse Sufi ideas and practices, and the special manner in which this is done, and also symbolic demonstrations of Sufi ideas carried out in a large Hindu Kush community, which has branches in Europe, provides another first-class document. Because, no doubt, it was published in The Lady, a woman's weekly magazine, this could be considered lost as research material. A resolute correspondent of the Times of London, writing in 1964, imparted an account of ideas and practices in Afghanistan and their ramifications in the Arab world. It seems unlikely that this valuable report will ever form a part of the formal literature on Sufism. An article in She magazine in 1963 and another in September 1965 contained at least some material of interest and some previously unrecorded facts. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation and is copyright 2019. All rights reserved.